Teachers of Reddit who was, without question, the worst student you have had to deal with. Story 1. I teach at a university that caters to military personnel, both retired and active duty. One gentleman was flagged as having PTSD. I specialize in working with traumatized veterans. He was openly hostile about the subject English and about having a female professor. He would pout during class, laugh at things he thought were stupid, and loudly declare how much smarter he was than everyone else and how far above the class he was. I did my best to work with him and used all the tricks from my training, but he was beyond obstinate and started to get physically aggressive with me. After talking it over with his advisor and the psychiatrist, he was removed from the class and put on academic probation. After that, I started getting threatening phone calls. He never said who he was, but I recognized his voice, and his threats were similar to the ones Head made via email, and he was calling from the number the school has on file as his. Then he started showing up outside the classroom, tried to intimidate me, and a few students had stood up to him. Remember, most of these students are military, and all of them are adult learners. Finally, he did physically assault me in a parking lot after dark. He pinned and tried to assault me, telling me he was going to show me how he would never take orders from no who ain't good for nothing. But I got my taser out just as he got his penis out, and he got in the junk. He was arrested. Charges were filed. I had a few stitches and a black eye, and the rest of the year passed peacefully. Someone even brought me cookies. TLDR student with PTSD escalated classroom disruptions to assault, got tasered in the junk for his efforts. Story 2. Dante. He was in my 10th grade English class. He was awful. He would call me over to ask questions and then laugh. He showed up maybe once a week or two, then complained that he was failing the class. When he was there, we got very little done because he was such a distraction. But the moment that sealed the deal for me was a parent conference. All Dante's teachers were there. His mom was there. We went around, and every teacher repeated the same basic tale. Dante rarely shows up, is a terrible distraction, is disrespectful, etc. After the teachers explained the problem, Dante's mother turned to the guidance counselor and said, "I don't understand why all these teachers are lying on my son. Her 2 older sons were both in jail. I suspect Dante has joined them by now." Story 3. The student that would have gotten me fired if I didn't quit. I taught in an after-school drawing program in the mid-2000s. While it was just glorified babysitting for 2 hours a day, I'd give instruction on how to draw a scene or cartoon character for the first hour, then have a free draw hour afterward so they can color or draw something else with their knowledge. This one 4th grade girl always showed up late, sat in the back, and talked constantly with her 4 friends. What I didn't like about her was how she would take more and more students to the back with her. So this group of 5 became a group of 10, half the class. They were loud, and half the time they ditched the class, which reporting was a huge pain without access to the school's roster program. But the one thing that made her an unbearable nightmare was her enabling mother. Her mom was an absolute basket case, an obvious divorcee who was upset beyond measure that her caring douchebag ex-husband wanted to enrich his daughter's education with extracurriculars like it was some grudge move. When mom would come in on the weeks to pick her up, it was never a hello or thanks. It was just a quick grab of the wrist, sometimes 15 minutes early, and out they went. She accused me of being a bad teacher because her daughter and her friends never drew anything, but I showed her the stuff kids 3 to 4 grades under her drew and invited her to sit on a class spoiler alert. She never did. But the afternoon I almost punched her mom in the face was when she came in and dragged her out 10 minutes early, then came storming back in as we were wrapping up and was shouting like a tantrum-fueled toddler at a 1st grader because apparently he wouldn't stop touching her arm. Mom was way off the deep end, screaming with hellfire that this kid was a menace, that he would grow up to be a rapist, and I had to intervene immediately. Mom was actually crying. I took her outside and told her to wait just 2 minutes so she could deal with me properly and not berate this poor kid further. Went back in, got cleanup underway, and told the kid that he didn't do anything wrong, didn't deserve that. And on his way out to not make eye contact with the mom, went to go talk to her and tell her very sternly to never yell at the kids like that. I was quite furious, and in the 2 minutes I spent trying to shake it off, I actually found myself getting progressively angrier at this horrible human being. I had a lot I wanted to say about her and her terrible daughter, and how I wish I had the power to kick her out of the program without a refund, and how she was ruining the classroom environment. But miraculously, mom left. She didn't even wait the 2 minutes I asked, just as well. I probably would have gotten fired after the tongue lashing I was ready to unload upon her. Still, her daughter wanted out at all costs. Even if that meant lying, she found she couldn't get out lying about the students picking on her, though she was quite a bully. So her next idea was to lie about the teacher. I showed up with my laptop and showed the kids a number of paintings by Monet, as well as a few comic book covers. The lesson was a bit on color theory, and I wanted to show how both old paintings and contemporary pop art follow the same rules of composition, and did the lesson entirely with colors and no penciling beforehand. It was actually an awesome lesson, one of my much better days. Even the clique in the back started doing some painting. Of course, Nightmare's student just groused and pouted. She drew a single star with red, turned it in, then just sat in the back. I was actually getting really concerned for her, and was afraid something at home was preventing her from focusing or just being a human being for once. I decided to have a meeting with my boss to see what I could do. He emailed me first. Nightmare student's mom emailed me again tonight. If the words were handwritten, they probably would have been etched with enough force to tear the paper. You have some major explaining to do. Her daughter said you brought in your laptop and showed them nudes, photographic nudes for reference. I responded immediately, showing him the images I sent out, then explained the girl's horrible behavior in class, her awful mother, and apologized for not bringing it up earlier. I said she had been ditching class and looking for ways to get out of it. And if you were to ask any of the other kids or their parents, they would say I did no such thing. Thanks, he responded, that's a relief. But Mom already said she told the principal and all the other parents, and I don't know what to say to her or her mom when I meet them next week. The school probably won't renew us next season. Because of this, they'll try to find another campus to post you at, knowing how far Mom took her daughter's lie. I was going to have no more of this. I realized how easily an idiot child could ruin my life forever. How one lie to get out of class they didn't want to be in could drag me down in flames, and was terrified at just how willingly a piece of mother like hers would take her darling daughter's side. Don't bother, I explained over the phone after thinking it through. Tell the principal I'm tired of the mom and daughters, and wish them the best of luck in their miserable, pathetic lives. Have somebody less patient deal with their trivial. I quit. Edit thank for the Reddit gold. First time I ever got any too, so you can pat yourself on the back for taking my innocence. Story 4. I worked in schools from when I was 17 to when I was 23. I left because of the parents. I started out working in inner-city schools and then took a better-paying job in the suburbs. Holy, upper-middle-class rich parents are terrible people, and apparently their children can do no wrong. Now I'm a park ranger, and life is much better. Story 5. It depends on what you mean by worst. Hello, wall of text. A parent pulled strings to get her kid who could not read or write in my advanced HS writing class. The kid was nice and all, but he was definitely the worst student in the sense that he really did not have the ability to do what everybody else was doing. Figuratively speaking, I cut the strings that Mom pulled and had him put into a remedial class instead. I had another HS kid who could read and write not at grade level, but still better than many of his peers, but who was extremely impulsive. In addition to continually getting into fights with his peers, both male and female, he threw stuff in the classroom at me, at other students, out the windows, farted out loud, and had this horrible habit of announcing his desires and discomforts to the whole world. I'm hungry, damn. It's cold in here. Damn, I'm horny. He wasn't the only one who did this. I can't imagine what type of home environment would create a person who, instead of saying, hey, mind if I eat something, or what are we having for lunch, or even Mom, can you feed me please, just walks around shouting, I am hungry. But he was definitely the worst offender. One day, we had a fire alarm, a real one. This happened often at this particular school. He was the last student out of the room, and when he left, he laughed in my face and slammed the door shut. He stood outside holding the doorknob, so I couldn't get out. He wrenched or jacked this so hard that, once he fled the building, the doorknob didn't work anymore. I was trapped in my classroom with the fire alarm going off, and I couldn't call anyone to let me out because they had all gone outside with the students. So I sat there with my fingers in my ears. The fire alarm was very loud for about an hour. Eventually, I heard voices outside. It was the firefighters responding to the call. I explained the situation through the door, and they all had a good laugh. Then they brought a custodian in to jimmy the door open. That was the worst day of my teaching career, and then, of course, the kids mocked me for it for weeks afterward. That kid was definitely the worst in terms of classroom behavior. The last one was the worst human being I have ever known. He was a very bright student, made good grades, and impressed all the teachers and many of his peers with his talent. But he was and is an utter sociopath. I fell under his spell for his 9th, 10th grade years. But by the time he got to 11th grade, I was starting to get suspicious. By the end of his 11th grade year, all the teachers knew he was a piece of, and by the time he graduated, he was roundly hated by many of his peers and any teacher that had him in class. He lied, he stole, he cheated, he backstabbed his friends, gossiped vigorously about them, and he was utterly immoral about all of it. He schemed his way into a full scholarship to an out-of-state university with a prestigious program in his field of interest and got kicked out within a year for selling drugs. TLDR, worst student academically couldn't read, or write, worst student behaviorally trapped me in a classroom. During a fire, worst student morally turned everyone against him and lost a scholarship for being a drug dealer. Edit thanks to whoever purchased Reddit Gold for me. His name was Fats. Story 6K was 14. at least 65, bipolar with ADHD. His mother refused to medicate him. She had also just given birth to twins, and his father was out of the picture. So he basically had no parental supervision. Furthermore, he lived in Harlem, and several gangs were trying to recruit him, which understandably made him even more on edge. Oh, and this was my first year of teaching, so I was incredibly unprepared to handle how this underlying emotional stuff transferred into the classroom. Underneath all of that he was dealing with, he was a pretty sweet kid, but ultimately his frequent violent outbursts were a safety concern for himself and everyone at the school. He ended up having to transfer to a District 75 school. Story 7, I taught a kid who kicked me because I refused him a cigarette, and I should probably clarify that this was the same school that had a small gang problem, wherein a rival gang broke in with shotguns, tear gas, and flash bombs. Edit X2 for those calling bullshit. Story 8, I'm not a teacher, but when I was in 6th grade, a kid in my math class drove my teacher to quit her job. This kid would always go to the bathroom for like 30 minutes and end up skipping half the class. So one day she wouldn't let him go, and he just peed in his pants right in the middle of class. The teacher ended up getting in trouble for not letting him go to the bathroom. Also, he would throw crackers and other food at her in the middle of class. One day, a baby carrot hit her straight in the forehead, and she burst into tears and never came back to school again. Edit grammar. Story 9, classmate of worst student ever here. This girl left school as soon as she turned 16. So you can imagine how many she gave. In our history class, she would blatantly text, listen to loud music, etc. Our school doesn't have a detention system, so she was never at risk for anything. Our teacher was also slightly passive-aggressive, so rather than confronting her, he ignored her. She would argue against any sort of in-class work he would assign. Just because she didn't care didn't mean her parents didn't, and had have to dedicate half of our class time to explaining why the work was important while the rest of the class sat quietly and listened to her complaints. So the end of the year rolls around, and he's happy he'll never have to see her again. He starts smiling at the end of each class, bigger each day, and we all realize that he's just happy to finally be rid of her. Then the final exam comes along. She absolutely bombs it. We were barely required to write 4 pages about history, and she bombed it. Obviously, he didn't want to fail her. So he took to the only outlet for aggression he had left: verbal abuse. She had spent so much time aggravating him that he let out the loudest "God damn it" I've ever heard when she protested her grade, a curved 70. He said, "Are you really so dumb that you don't realize the gift I am giving you here? You wrote half a paragraph. You better hope you find yourself a sugar daddy, because there's no way a dumb like you'll find a job." She just straight up walked out of class. None of us said anything, mostly cause we were on his side anyway. Partly because we were petrified. Edit for those asking, we don't have a detention system because she's really one of a kind at our school. Aside from copious amounts of pot smoking, our school doesn't have behavior problems, so we don't need a disciplinary system most of the time. If anything happens, students just get expelled. Also, the teacher wasn't punished. Most of the other teachers told about the situation either didn't believe it happened or sided with the teacher. No one liked the student anyway. I probably missed the karma boat. But aspects of this story will seem unbelievable, but I assure you this is true. In 4 didn't happen 10. I work for a tutoring agency, which finds after-school tutors for people. One of our clients is extremely wealthy, not a household name, but a foreigner whose wealth is into the billions. My friend, let's call him Tom, needed a job. So I hooked him up with one teaching this client's 9-year-old son henceforth, Danny, over his school holidays. Danny was a nightmare, the kind of child who has never been told no in his life, a child who lived a life of near unimaginable wealth, who has an army of staff waiting on him and calling him sir, and who he in return treats like dirt. Tom was little more than a butler in Danny's eyes, which made conducting lessons very difficult. They would have long, drawn-out battles over work, which resulted in little Danny crying and throwing a gigantic tantrum, and leaving Tom frustrated but quite powerless. Anyway, one day the family, Tom, and some of the house staff had a barbecue in the grounds of the family complex. The father and elder brother 16 had shot some animals to be cooked. As lunch was wrapping up, everybody except the 2 brothers returned indoors. Tom went in and waited for Danny to rejoin him for a lesson. After a while, Danny came back, and very quietly, and behaving oddly well. This was so out of the ordinary that Tom asked what the matter was. "My snowmobile has caught fire," came his reply. This was rather an understatement. What had happened was the snowmobile had caught fire where it was housed, in the garage of the grandparents' luxurious annex. Danny says that he just turned the ignition and a small fire started in the engine. He ran out of the garage as the fire spread, igniting jerrycans and setting the whole annex on fire. When I say annex, this was a good-sized house which Danny's mother had spent years with architects and carpenters designing to precise specifications. The fire brigade was called, and the blaze lasted 9 hours, reducing the building to a scorched shell. It took Danny's parents 3 hours to get over it. That evening, they all ate dinner in the main house, making pleasant conversation while firefighters were still battling the flames a safe distance away. According to Tom, the family's reaction resembled what anyone else's parents' reaction might be after accidentally smashing a plate. TLDR kid burned his own grandparents' house to the ground. Story 10 University student actively stalked me with the intent of putting me in a position where she could accuse me of racism. I had to carry around an audio recorder pre-smartphone pretty much 24/7 for an entire semester. Story 11 My student A was easily one of my most challenging students. Out of my many stories, this one comes to mind. I overheard A ask other students while they were eating breakfast, "Do you want to kill kids with me?" This was right after the Sandy Hook incident, so I was really uneasy. One of my students approached me minutes afterwards and said that A told him he had a gun in his backpack. I told my paraprofessional not to allow anyone to leave the room. A saw me starting to leave, and he starts screaming on the top of his lungs. "What are you doing? Where are you going?" I left as quickly as possible to tell the principal. Listen to this. She was too busy. She checked his book bag about 2 hours later. There wasn't anything in the bag, but the 2 hours of waiting was pure agony. When anyone would go by the door, he would start throwing a tantrum. Then, that same day, he was telling me he moved the gun to his sister's backpack. Then he started to run, and I chased after him. Overall, he never had a gun. But it was a very stressful day. His consequence: nothing. I have plenty of more crazy stories with him, with no consequences outside of the classroom consequence. Story 12 Billy, a 65 male student who has a history for punching his teachers. He was sent to my school after beating up the wrestling coach. He has a way of getting really upset and yelling and cursing. One day, he's out of his seat. I ask him to sit down. He walks over to the board and starts drawing. I walk up to him and say, "Sit down now." His response with, "You don't tell me what to do. I run this." And he's looming over me. I'm 58 in front of the entire class. So I had to make him leave. I was lucky he decided to leave. But if he decided to go crazy, there would have been no stopping him. Story 13, age 13. The psycho. I filled in for a teacher who was supervising final for the 9th graders. It was a language class for students who weren't qualified to choose a third language, French, Spanish, or German. So they got to focus on their English studies instead. At least that was the point. I had 6 students in the classroom. Now at this school, they have certain rules. No phones in the classroom. If they had their phone with them, they were required to turn it in to the teacher to be put in a locked cupboard until the end of class. Furthermore, it's a nut-free school since there are a couple of students with severe nut allergies. Now ID been warned about this 7th grade class by many of the teachers. ID never had this class before. Apparently a couple of them were little shitheads. But hey, how bad could they possibly be? So one student A had brought his phone into the classroom, which he handed in immediately one of my favorite students, BTW, to be locked in the cupboard. M brought a Snickers and a bag of M&Ms to class. I calmly explained the rules to him about this being a nut-free school and asked him to hand the contraband over, telling him that he could come pick them up at the end of the day. Very reluctantly, he handed the stuff over to me, and I then locked it in the cupboard with the phone. M and another student were being absolute shits the entire lesson. When the lesson was over, I go to the cupboard to retrieve his phone. As I start to unlock the padlock, M tackles me, starts hitting me, and screaming at me. "I want my candy, you! I will kill you! I want my candy now!" Mild paraphrasing, just so, you know. Now, this kid is about 46 and weighs about 90 pounds. I threw him off me and restrained him and carried him out of the classroom. He was kicking and screaming the entire time, and by now attracting quite a crowd. I put him down outside in the hallway, told him to calm down, and that he'd get his stuff back at the end of the day. Turned and started walking back to the classroom when he started punching me in the back and neck, kicking me in the legs. I turned around and told him, "Stop right now. You're just embarrassing yourself. None of the students think you're cool for hitting me. Just go away." He stopped hitting and kicking me and noticed the other students looking at him with disgust. I'm a popular teacher. And he just walked away. I went back into the room and gave his phone to him. He told me, "I hate that kid. He's like this all the time. I want to switch class." He then gave me a hug before going to his next class. I filed a report to the principal, told his head teacher what had happened, and filed a report to the superintendent. The school filed a police report for assault. Social services got involved, and the kid was removed from class forever. I was covered in bruises for weeks. One of my favorite students ever used to call me Mama C. He got really into playing lawyer for a mock trial based on the Crucible. He shouted from a parade float that Mrs. C was the best English teacher ever. And he also beat his uncle to death. Broke my heart. His cousin, the uncle's son, was also in my first period of the time. I still have a Christmas card I never mailed to him in jail. He should be out by now. Edit, there was a dispute between his family and his uncle that escalated from insult. I think, to property damage to violence. I do not know details because our interactions thereafter were not about the incident, but his efforts to cope with the situation, including lonely poetry he wrote. I have always thought he was roped into the final escalation by the other parties whose approval he craved and the drive to defend the offended family member. Story 14. There's a kindergarten student at my school who's the future Dexter Morgan, minus the father's code. Earlier this school year, there was an earthquake drill in which all the students have to duck underneath their tables and wait for the bell to stop. So while one of the boys in this class was getting underneath the table, he accidentally hits his head and starts crying. What do you think this little girl starts doing? She starts laughing hysterically. The teacher is shocked and asks the girl why she's laughing, in which she replies, "I'm not laughing because he hit his head. I'm laughing because it hurt him." What then just recently, she punched a disabled girl in a walker in the face. She said the disabled girl was laughing at her, so she thought it was an appropriate response to punch her in the face. And this is only in kindergarten. I can't imagine her being in my 7th, 8th grade class as a teen. But with her track record, I doubt she lasts another few years at our school. My 7th grade science teacher, she had my older brother a year prior to getting me. She didn't like my brother, so decided that it was okay to take that dislike out on me. She'd lose assignments that I turned in, would give me lower grades, just because of who I was, wouldn't allow me to make up work when I missed school, things like that. Finally, she lost an assignment that my dad had helped me with, so he knew I turned it in. He threw a fit at the principal, got her in trouble. She had to apologize to me personally. I bet that really stuck in her craw. Unfortunately, because of the antics of my brother and several cousins, I had a lot of teachers that were leery of me at first, thinking I'd be a pain and a troublemaker like them. Story 15. Currently, this student in 5th grade. She's constantly seeking the attention of older boys in the school, like middle and high school boys, and then complains to her mom that they try to touch her inappropriately. The mom's always coming to complain and threaten that she would report it to the police. Of course, this never happens because it's not true. Said boys are not interested and have been warned to keep away and not touch. She's always moody and grouchy and spends most of the time in class pouting about trivial stuff. Takes 3 times as long to complete anything at all. Never turns in her homework. When I follow up, the mom defends her with some stupid excuse, and I have to let it go. Grades keep sliding, but the mother blames me. Even other kids in class have learned to avoid her like the plague, without being told to do so. No friends whatsoever. Then 2 weeks ago, she asked to go to the bathroom. Comes back to class, crying her eyes out, and alleges that a stranger touched her inappropriately as she came out of the bathroom. A man she had never seen before. So, she's alleging that a guy walked off the neighborhood long driveway into school. Went past the front office, unseen. Front office is always manned, always busy, past a couple hallways, and somehow managed to find her coming out of the bathroom and touched her. The cameras reveal her coming in and out of the bathroom and back to class with no incidents. But because she said we had to lock down the school and call the cops and report it, we had to call each parent to inform them of the alleged incident. Reporters and TV cameras showed up. So we were in the news, the entire day wasted. Now the school is forced to upgrade security, which means the district has to cut the budget to accommodate the upgrade. Everyone knows nothing really happened. I'm a guy, and I'm only hoping that the school year ends, and she moves on before she alleges that I did something to her. Story 16. Obligatory, not a teacher, but my mom is. One year, she had a student who was failing because he hadn't turned in any of the work and missed a test or two. The night before her big fetal cat dissection class, after Shed prepped the whole lab and had the fetal cats in the room, he and some friends broke into the school. They plugged the drains in all her sinks and the ones in the floor too, then turned them all on. They also unwrapped the fetal cats, ripped them apart, and left them around the room. When people started arriving the next day, they found the room underneath hers dripping water from the ceiling. Her room had about an inch of water, and there were fetal cat parts everywhere apparently. She still had to teach him for the rest of the semester. I forget what the punishment was, but it wasn't anything major. They ended up having to rip out the floor and repair it that summer too. Story 17. I teach adults. She was a severe and chronic know-it-all. She would commentate nonstop through all my lectures and demos. Okay, I see. Well, I knew that too. I see. Is that how you're going to do that? Are you sure? I see. Okay, wouldn't it be better this way? Fine. Okay, I see. Oh, yes, I knew that too. And on and on. I finally snapped and told her she was being rude to me. She emailed me the next day telling me that I owed her an apology. Story 18, currently a teacher, but this was when I was working as a substitute while getting my master's. I had taken this job as a teacher assistant. Most times this meant working with the kindergartners, half the pay of a regular day, but an easy one and worth a break from working high schools. I get there, and they give me directions to this isolated wing of the school. I had only been to this school twice before, and always in the main wing to work in a regular classroom. This wing had only one entrance in, and it was a long hallway with tiny classrooms. Turns out, this was for students enrolled in a special program designed for emotional disturbed students. I always made a point to never do special education. I was not, and am not a person who can do special ed on a regular basis. I did my one required class and currently work with learning disabled students in my regular classes, but never specialty work such as this. I enter this small classroom for 5th graders. Only 2 students are enrolled at this age group, and 1 was absent. So there were 2 teachers for this one kid for that day. This kid had anger issues, but he was managing it well. I complimented his handling of his anger when another kid during gym was provoking him. Sadly, I didn't get to spend my entire day with this kid. During the first half of the 5th grader, we could hear a student down the hall pitching a major fit. I mean, full-on bitch fest with screaming, shouting, kicking, punching, the works. He was placed in an isolated classroom, basically a classroom, without furniture, where he banged and kicked the door repeatedly while yelling about whatever. At the time, I was happy to not be dealing with that kid. After my lunch, I'm told that I would be finishing my day in another room. I was placed in the 2nd grade room with 3 students. There was the teacher, myself, and a student teacher ST from the local community college. 2 of the kids were very well behaved, including a very sweet, if not a little slow, girl who I still wonder why she was in an ED program. The 3rd was the little hellraiser from earlier. The best way I could describe him is to just imagine a real-life Cartman, same shape, same size, same personality. We were working with the kids on math. The 2 good kids were working on their handout, but needed a lot of guidance. Cartman refused to do the work and demanded he do what he wanted. I don't remember what the lead teacher did as I was working with the girl. Eventually, the teacher told ST and myself to take the 2 boys to recess. ST and I walked both boys down with ST and the other boy moving ahead of us and Cartman and I falling behind. Just as we reached the door to the outside, he said he had to pee and marched right into the girls' bathroom. I tried to direct him to the correct one, but he ignored me and continued on his merry way. Without even closing the stall door, he dropped true and proceeded with his business while I watched the door to keep any girls from entering at that moment. His task completed, he left without flushing or washing his hands and marched right out the door. Outside, ST and the other boy just sort of hung out by the door away from the other students. Cartman spent his time stomping around and acted as if he was looking for a fight. He grabbed a ball and bounced it hard on the ground while angrily muttering to himself. He eventually threw the ball and continued to stomp around. I tried to talk to him a bit to see what he wanted to do, and eventually it was decided that it would be best if he went back in. We headed back for the door, and I told the ST that I would take him back. These were really hit the fan. Immediately, as we entered the school, he bolted for the fire alarm. I ran and stopped him just before he could pull it. That set him off. He was angry and started attacking me by punching and kicking me. With no one around to help and no way of contacting anyone for help, I put him hand on his shoulder and directed him down the hall to where I could get someone to take over. During this time, he continued to punch and kick me. He was aiming for my face, hitting my nose twice, and for my crotch. He also spewed every profanity he could, such as calling me A, and keep in mind, he was a 2nd grader. It took every ounce of control. I had to keep myself from knocking his to the ground and pinning him there. Eventually, one of the special ed teachers was walking down the hall and saw me struggling with him. She took over and had me report to the nurse's office. It wasn't until I got there that I finally lost it and broke down. They took a statement about the incident and made sure I wasn't hurt. I wasn't. He was a weak hitter. I also spoke with the assistant principal and another special education teacher. I had made some sort of comment about how could a kid get that way, and it was implied, but not directly stated, as that would be illegal, that he had a shitty home life. It seems Mom was a punching bag for Dad, and Cartman picked up on it. I'm not naive to think that no one lives this way. I had a shitty home life too growing up, but I managed to hold it all together mostly because someone had to act like a mom to my younger brother at the time. Probably not doubt, due to my being in shock of the whole thing. It was unfathomable that a kid at that age would do such a thing. I was escorted back to the classroom so I could get my things there. Mom was talking with a teacher as Cartman stood next to her. I remember he was giving her about what he wanted when they got home. He ended up getting suspended for 3 days. Mom also apologized to me. The look on her face as she did so broke my heart. As I left, I had to sign out in the front office, and the secretary wished me a good rest of the day and stated that she hoped this one incident wouldn't keep me from ever going back. I never did. I also wrote a letter to HR about how I felt deceived by the phone system by not being warned that it was for a special ed position. I also stated that I thought it was dangerous to allow someone untrained to work in such a program. I never did get a response. I continued to work as a sub until I finished my program and was hired the following school year in a different district. Edit to add TLDR. Working as a sub with emotionally disturbed students and was physically assaulted by Cartman.